Hello there, boys and girls. My name is Winston, and today I'm going to read one of my favorite stories. Would you like to join me? All right, here we go. This week's story is straight from the Bible. You can find it in the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 17. God's people had some really scary enemies. It seems like everywhere they turned, some group was ready to pounce on them. Some of their fiercest rivals were the Philistines. They lived in an area very close to where the Israelites lived. One weird thing about some of the people from the Philistine territory is that some of them were giants. Yes, actual giants. These giants were much taller than any basketball player in the world. They had huge hands, huge feet, big heads, and very big muscles. They had giant fingers, giant toes. Everything about them was gigantic, including their egos. One day, the Philistine army gathered on top of one hill, very close to where God's people lived. The army of God's people gathered on top of the opposite hill, and they all stared at each other across the valley. They stared, and they glared, and they shouted rude things to each other. Suddenly, one of the hairy, scary Philistine giants pushed his way forward to the front of the hill. The valley shook, and so did everyone there, with every step the giant took. Boom, clop, rattle, roar. His footsteps sounded like thunder throughout the valley. The giant was a soldier named Goliath. He lived in a city called Gath, and he was very famous. He had never lost a fight because he was so big and mean. Even his own people were a bit afraid of him. So when he clomped his way to the front of the battle lines, everyone moved aside. Now, Goliath wasn't just big, he was a bully. A big bully. Day after day he would taunt and bully the Israelites from his place on top of the hill. The entire valley would fall silent. Even the birds tried not to squawk.
"Send your best soldier to fight me, if you dare," Goliath shouted. "If I win, you will be our slaves. Of course, if you win, we will be your slaves." And then he and the entire Philistine army would laugh so hard that some of them would fall down. The idea that God's people could fight Goliath, much less win, really cracked them up. God's people were frightened and humiliated. No one likes to be threatened, but to be threatened and laughed at was really awful. And so the days passed. Goliath would come out every morning and terrify and mock God's people. "You big scaredy cats."
Meow, meow, meow.
And then, one day, he said it. The thing that no one should ever say. Goliath opened his huge mouth and exposed his giant teeth and shouted so hard that big globs of spit fell on his soldiers' helmets.
"Your God can't save you."
His words bounced off both mountainsides and echoed round and round the valley. And then there was total silence. In the valley below, all of God's creatures heard what that terrible giant had said. The ants stopped building their hill. The hedgehogs jumped down their holes. The bees stopped buzzing, and the gazelles ran for the hills. Goliath had insulted God, the creator of the universe. Uh-oh. What an exciting story. I can't wait to see what happens next. I hope you'll join me as we read another chapter of God's story. Until then,